As kids, all or most of us grew up watching either animated or live action adaptations of fairy tales, either on VHS or cable TV, DVD. Nowadays, kids just watch them for free on YouTube. A fairy tale is typically an old folk tale that has been turned into a children's story for the purpose of instilling morals or scaring them into obedience. The origins of some of these stories are supposed to date back thousands of years, but the ones that we are mostly familiar with are the ones published by either the Brothers Grimm or Hans Christian Andersen. Many of those stories were turned into full-length animated Disney films, which for most of us is the definitive version. Many early Disney films were dark and scary, but as time moved on, Disney started to remove a lot of the darkness and cruelty from later adaptations. They're kids' movies. They have to merchandise these towards kids, and let's face it, make a lot of money. So today I want to talk about 5 fairy tale adaptations that I remember seeing as a kid and liking, but looking back now thinking, this is really fucked up. First of all, I'm including all children's movies or adaptations, and I'm also excluding anything that takes huge liberties, like I won't be talking about Pinocchio's Revenge or Rumpelstiltskin starring Rom from DS9. So let's start with Pinocchio. There's actually 2 Pinocchio adaptations on this list, and we're going to start with the 1972 Italian cartoon film version, The Adventures of Pinocchio. This was released in North America in 1978 with an English dub, and this is actually the version that I grew up watching. I remember going to the video store with my mom one day wanting to rent the Disney Pinocchio, and they didn't have the Disney Pinocchio, so she rented this instead, and I fell in love with it. Probably because it's dark and morbid, just like me. Now I say dark and morbid because it's much more closer to the original story than the Disney version, or than most versions. There's no singing or musical numbers. In fact, before Jiminy Cricket can even sing a note, Pinocchio kills him. Yes, that's right. Early on in this movie, Pinocchio kills Jiminy Cricket. He gets mad at him, throws a hammer at him, crushing him and killing him. The cricket does come back later on as a ghost to haunt Pinocchio. Now, what other crazy shit happens in this? Oh yeah, Geppetto gets thrown in jail by the police for beating Pinocchio. That's right, for beating a puppet.
Oh, you were going to break him into little pieces, were you, huh?
So I guess the laws against puppet abuse were pretty strict in this little village back in the day.
That's enough now. Come along to prison.
In a very morbid scene, Pinocchio is actually starving to death, and he falls asleep by a fire, burning his feet. He burns his feet right off, and there's this weird little morbid scene where he's trying to walk on these burnt stubs of legs. Later on in the movie, the cat and fox steal all of Pinocchio's money and hang him. Like they hang him from a tree by the neck. He's swinging there in the wind, practically dead, with his arms tied behind his back, hanging from a noose. In another real morbid scene, Pinocchio tries sacrificing himself to be thrown in the fire as firewood.
Release Harlequin officers! Please take me instead and throw me into the fire!
Later on, he gets caught by this weird giant green guy who's threatening to boil Pinocchio alive. Of course, he turns into the donkey like he does in all the other adaptations, but in this he gets sent to the circus where he's pretty much a slave doing circus tricks until he gets crippled and lame. This is all pretty horrifying stuff, but one thing it does a fantastic job of letting you realize all the horrible things that Pinocchio has to go through in order to become a real boy. You really do feel all of his pain and suffering in this version, so when he does turn into a real boy, you really feel it. The animation is fantastic, as is the musical score, which at sometimes is haunting like a horror movie. This is my favorite Pinocchio adaptation because not only is it dark, it's also at times beautiful. The next one on our list is another Pinocchio adaptation, and this is part of Shelley Duvall's Fairy Tale Theater, which is a little show that ran between 1982 and 1987. It was kind of a neat show where like famous movie stars and celebrities would guest star in all these fairy tale adaptations, and a lot of them were directed by famous Hollywood directors as well, like Francis Ford Coppola. The episode in question here stars Paul Reubens, better known as Pee Wee Herman, as Pinocchio. And there's also cameos by Jim Belushi, Michael Richards, and James Coburn. So on paper, this sounds pretty damn cool, right?
I bet this is going to be the best show I've ever seen in my life!
Well, the outcome happens to be one of the most annoying portrayals of Pinocchio known to man. It's not Paul Reubens playing Pinocchio. It's Paul Reubens as Pee Wee Herman playing Pinocchio. As a huge Pee Wee Herman fan as a kid, I couldn't even stomach this performance, it's so goddamn annoying. But that alone isn't enough for it to make this list. There's two more reasons. The first being its unabashed portrayal of over-the-top Italian stereotypes. We all know Pinocchio is an Italian story and all, but oh my god, the amount of over-the-top, bad Italian accents delivered by everyone in this, except for Paul Reubens.
Come on, Pinocchio, no capiche. Speak the English.
Including the narrator who does a horrible, over-the-top, stereotypical Italian accent.
He never lied, he never stole, and he never ever again disobeyed his father.
Now on top of that, this appears to be aimed way more towards adults than children. The amount of sexual innuendo and wood jokes in this for a kid's show is pretty crazy.
Never seen a wood like this before. I wonder what kind of wood that is.
Wood? Wood?
Like the blue fairy alone appears to be this crazy horn dog. Like just look at her as she's talking about turning Pinocchio into a real boy. She's stroking her magic wand.
If you do that, then you will become a real live boy.
I don't think I'm making this up. This is all sexual subtext here.
Very kind, a very loving man. He also happens to be a personal favorite of mine.
And in the end, when Pinocchio turns into a real boy, it's implied that Geppetto takes the blue fairy to his bedroom for a good time.
Please, I want to show you my bedroom. We have so many carvings in the bedroom.
This adaptation seems void of any of the morals or symbolism that defines the story of Pinocchio. It may sound like I'm giving this adaptation a really hard time, but it really is highly entertaining.
Chop me up! Throw me on the stove! Use me for firewood! Where's the axe? I'll do it myself!
Number 3 on my list is another episode from Fairy Tale Theater. Actually, a lot of these are pretty dark and morbid. I didn't want to include too many, so I'm just going to put 2 on this list, and this one is Beauty and the Beast. This stars Susan Sarandon as Beauty. Okay, fine, good, yeah, that's good. And Klaus Kinski as the Beast. That's right. Need I say more? If you don't know who Klaus Kinski is, just look it up. This guy is a fucking madman.
Diesmal schlag ich ihn, die Verslauferte dich verlassen, du. Diesmal sitz in dem Kostüm.
Actually, this version is pretty cool in a lot of ways. Like, visually, it's very cool. It borrows a lot from the 1946 film version of Beauty and the Beast. But what really puts this over the top is the performances.
Der Beast, komm an, you!
Klaus Kinski as the Beast is gotta be one of the most bizarre, strange, creepy performances, but not in a good way. Like, he's scary, but he's not scary in a good way.
Do not look into my eyes like that. You will see me only in the evening.
And I get the impression that every cast member and crew member on this set were terrified of Klaus Kinski. The way he plays the Beast is more like an SS officer than anything else.
Prepare to die. No, my lord. Silence!
Just look at some of these clips screaming at this poor old man for touching his rose.
They've stolen my rose!
He threatens to kill this poor old guy. Kill him for taking a rose.
And you must die!
His favorite rose.
The one I love the most.
His performance as the Beast comes off more like a sociopath than a tortured soul. You don't believe for 1 second that Beauty's actually falling in love with this guy. He goes through these crazy fits of rage, screaming and yelling at night, playing these weird, sick fucking mind games.
Don't you cut it!
Toss your curtain! Your look is hurting me! Toss your curtain!
And Susan Sarandon plays Beauty more like she's got battered woman syndrome rather than she's actually legitimately falling in love with the Beast. And just look at this final shot, after the Beast is transformed back into a human prince. Look at his eyes. This is a man who's going to kill somebody. Susan Sarandon as Beauty is terrified. Been manipulated to stay with an abusive person.
Are you afraid?
I love to be afraid.
Beauty choosing to stay with the transformed Beast seems more like a tragedy in this than a happy ending. Number 4 on my list, and probably the least fucked up of all these adaptations, is the 1975 anime version of The Little Mermaid. This is much closer to the original story than the Disney version we all know, so by default it's much more morbid. Now, this is a kid's film, and the amount of bare mermaid breast in this is pretty crazy. The Little Mermaid's swimming around with her tits hanging out. There's a scene where all of her sisters are all sleeping together, their tits are hanging out. Now that being said, they're not human tits, they're mermaid tits in this case, so I guess it's passable. Now we all know the story of the Little Mermaid where she falls in love with a real man and strikes a deal with a sea witch to basically sell her voice to her in exchange for human legs. But in this adaptation, there's a little bit more to that deal. Not only does she have to give up her voice, if the prince doesn't fall in love with her back and marry her, the mermaid will turn into sea foam and die. So she turns human and tries to win over the prince's love. The prince has some weird talking cat that has it out for the Little Mermaid and convinces a bunch of other crazy felines to attack the Little Mermaid. There's a crazy scene where the prince bloodily massacres all these cats. The Little Mermaid has a little fish friend in this, of course, who hates the fact that the Little Mermaid has basically given up everything to become human and finds a loophole for her. There's a magic dagger that if she kills the prince with the magic dagger and stabs him through the heart, she can become a mermaid again and the spell is broken. So the film ends with the Little Mermaid standing over a sleeping prince holding a dagger about to stab him in the chest. But she loves him too much and can't do it, so she decides to jump off the boat and commit suicide, and then turns into a bunch of bubbles that float up to the sky as her poor fish friends frantically swimming after these bubbles trying to catch her or something. It's pretty morbid stuff. Then this narration kicks in saying that the Little Mermaid's soul falls back to the sea and turns into sea foam. And then it ends with a shot of this rock with a bunch of green goop on it. So basically this children's movie ends with the remnants of the Little Mermaid smeared on a rock like a bunch of shit. The last on my list is Tim Burton's Hansel and Gretel, which was actually made for the Disney Channel to air around Halloween time in 1983. Apparently it only ever aired twice. This is totally the most bizarre adaptation of Hansel and Gretel you'll ever see. In case you couldn't tell from the title, this is a German story, and everything about Hansel and Gretel is super German. So in a complete mindfuck here, Tim Burton casts an all-Asian cast. It starts off with Hansel and Gretel who live with their father, who's a toy maker, and their bitch of a stepmother. Like, this is a real bitch. She tried starving the poor kids to death, and she's taunting them while she's sitting there eating this big bowl of what looks like dog shit. And the stepmom's played by a man who's dressed like a samurai for some reason. Of course, this version is super artsy and surreal. Like, look at the outside of the house. It's the size of an outhouse, but inside is infinite. There's this weird ladder that comes from the sky in their house that takes them to this second floor that never existed there before that Hansel and Gretel sleep in. This bitch-ass trick of a stepmom takes Hansel and Gretel out to the woods with the intention of getting them lost. They of course stumble upon the house made of candy that the witch lives in. Then the house starts oozing all this weird multicolored shit that looks like paint, and the kids start eating it. Didn't anyone tell these kids it's not good to drink fucking paint? And this witch looks like a meth addict with a candy cane for a nose. This has got to be one of the most bizarre witch designs I've seen. She takes him into the house and tells him that everything is edible, and they start eating everything. They start eating the tables. The chairs start oozing this weird blue ink stuff that they start eating. The kids go to bed that night, and Hansel's bed grows these bunch of candy cane arms and starts attacking him. The bed then eats him, where he's taken to this other weird dimension where he meets this gingerbread man, and the gingerbread man's trying to convince Hansel to eat him. This is totally some weird social commentary on the consumption of junk food here. Of course, the story ends in a big battle between the witch and Hansel and Gretel. And then the witch pulls out these candy cane nunchucks, and this kind of pseudo martial arts fight happens. And the witch does this big giant flying martial arts kick right into the oven. This whole thing is like a bad acid trip. Entertaining, yes. Terrifying, yes. Fucked up, yes. So that's it. That's my list of 5 fucked up fairy tale adaptations. I'm sure I've missed a few, so if I did, please let me know in the comments. I advise everyone to check these out because they are a little fucked up, yes, but they're also super entertaining, super stylistic, and just tons of fun. And some of them are the best adaptations of these stories. I think they're all super entertaining adaptations, because let's face it, sometimes to be entertaining, you gotta be fucked up.